I first presented a version of this paper at a conference about urban resilience in Delft, the Netherlands. And I spent the night before the conference at a hostel in The Hague, just off the plane, with a jet lag that kept me up all night, a queer state of temporal dislocation, not without relevance to the subject I will talk about today. The bed I slept in a hostel in The Hague was very short and narrow. You can see it here. I was on the top bunk with my head at the side of the wall and my feet extending out into the other top bunk across mine. A 20-year-old Polish guy, let's call him Victor, who had just found a summer job as a server in a restaurant in the city, slept in that bed across from mine. We chatted a little bit before going to bed, nothing much, mostly polite talk. He then went outside to smoke a joint, and I went to bed. When he came back to the room, he took his clothes off and lay in bed in his underwear, as was I and the other two guys in the bottom bunks. It was unusually hot for a hot night for Dutch standards. As I stretched while turning in bed, my feet touched Victor's. I noticed that there was a slight delay in moving his feet away. As the night progressed and until way into the morning, we engaged in a fascinating game of fousey. We were testing each other's boundaries. For how long will our feet touch before it's too awkward? How long until his come back to rest on mine after a dramatic exit? We never once looked at each other. As a good researcher, I interviewed Victor in the morning while he was getting ready to leave and I was having breakfast in the hostel lobby. He identified as straight, didn't have a girlfriend, but liked Dutch girls. Not a word about his or my feet or the night before. I wanted to start with this story, well, for one, because my boyfriend is not here yet. And because that space between the two short beds, pushed close to each other to accommodate more bodies in the tiny hostel room, exemplifies a queer space of becoming that is a constant reference point in what I am going to talk about today, albeit at a radically different scale. And what I'm going to talk about is mostly in relation to the city and the nation state. So I hope you can bear with me. I think I might take the entire 20 minutes that I was given. I'll try to go fast through the main argument and kind of see through by the end. First, I will propose a definition. So I guess I should just give an outline of the entire argument. I'm basically looking at sexual citizenship and trying to identify a queer component within it and kind of see that queer component as the insurgent aspect of sexual citizenship, the aspect of sexual citizenship that is kind of queering or questioning categories. I will start by proposing a definition of sexual citizenship in the context of the United States that as the ground around which the particular formulations of queer sociality I talk about here evolve. In recent literature on sexual citizenship, the concern with sexuality as it pertains to discussions of national citizenship mostly refers to the struggles for recognition of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people as full citizens. Of course, one of the problems with linking sexual citizenship with non-normative sexuality is that it limits its application to a specific segment of the population. For example, it's not operable for heterosexual citizens' rights. Also, it overly sexualizes LGBT citizens and desexualizes others, which plays into misconceptions of the excessively sexual and even quote-unquote vulgar queer. At the same time, the reliance on the heteronormative framework of citizenship shifts the discussion of sexual citizenship toward the direction of assimilation to legitimate forms of adult relationships on which the largely conservative systems of social welfare, at least in the case of the United States, are based. Despite these problems with the use of the term, sexual citizenship may still be useful to explore the contours of national citizenship and its outer limits and identify new directions for grassroots organizing that can expand notions of socioeconomic rights associated with it. Especially when focusing on the urban, sexual citizenship as an operative category can help relate the politics of sexuality with ethnicity, class, and social attitudes towards age, to paint a more accurate picture of an urban citizenship as it is actually experienced, especially by marginalized constituencies with diverse claims to social rights. This also points to an insurgent component of it, which has the potential to destabilize the normative functions of national citizenship. This is a notion of sexual citizenship that I find most promising not only for queer organizing, but for contemporary US politics as a whole. These are some of the kind of authors that are coming in and out of my argument. I am actually not going to touch on all of those books and arguments in this presentation. So, the city. A recent study of citizenship experience of Mexican, gay, bisexual, and transgender immigrants in San Diego, Stephen Epstein and Hector Carrillo consider citizenship in terms of ongoing struggles that reflect constantly shifting relationships of power. The authors identify 3 templates that the men whose immigrant experiences they study have encountered in the United States. These are the asylum, the rights, and the local attachments template. Of these, the local attachments template presents the most pertinent observations to understand how sexuality becomes an important part of one's sense of belonging to a specific community, and how that place-based experience of immigrant sexual citizenship in this particular case can open up new directions in activism for rights claims that transcend the urban. A significant account of the continuing importance of physical space as a place for the negotiation of difference, especially at the intersection of different experiences of marginality, comes when the gay and bisexual immigrants that Epstein and Carrillo interviewed referred to the gay bars and neighborhoods they visited as safe spaces to express their sexuality, which mattered to them immensely, despite occasionally experiencing racism and anti-immigrant sentiment from white gay men. Perhaps ironically, at a historical moment when the overall salience of the so-called neighborhoods may be in decline for US-born gay men, immigrants may sometimes find that these spaces offer distinct opportunities to learn and enact their sexual citizenship at the scale of the local. This may not appear so ironic in light of the increasing privatization of middle-class gay life, where domesticity and online or mobile dating has shifted the epicenter of everyday queer experience away from the public. The interesting finding of this study is that even though asylum seeking and rights claims with regard to sexual citizenship discourse still depend on discussions at the national level, these 2 templates reflect specialized legal knowledge that was typically gained after the immigrants in the study had already lived in San Diego for some time and have formed relationships with local people and with each other in the city's safe, tolerant, and even protecting spaces. I will skip over New York. Another important example from healthcare at the local level that shows how cities can set trailblazing agendas with regard to sexual citizenship and beyond comes from San Francisco. Recent reporting by the New York Times heralded San Francisco as a model for other cities for the treatment of HIV/AIDS and could become the first city in the world to completely eradicate the virus among its citizens. This success is based on the city's history as a pioneering center for the treatment of AIDS patients that started almost immediately as soon as the first cases of the disease were confirmed and relied heavily on the situated knowledge and cooperation between already established queer men's and women's organizations, well, at that time it would probably be LGBT, with significant presence in the city's bureaucratic machinery. This legacy is the backdrop for contemporary city investments on AIDS prevention programs through partnership with a diverse set of local organizations and through its own healthcare plan, Healthy San Francisco. The current large-scale rollout of a plan to make PrEP available to at-risk populations in San Francisco, regardless of whether they have health insurance or not, shows a kind of deeply embedded community organizing and LGBTQ+ groups presence on the ground. We see here that these bonds can inform policy changes that reverberate way beyond the city itself. PrEP has been found to reduce the risk of getting infected with HIV up to 100% and is available to homosexual and heterosexual San Francisco residents alike. And everyone, gay and straight, enjoys the benefits of a healthy citizenry, not least public health institutions at the federal level. This is to say that queer in the city can go beyond popular stories of sexy bourgeois bohemian neighborhood makeovers and affect the lives of citizens at a deeper, more systemic level. It may even present a way for the state's straight institutions to be a little more adventurous and experimental. So moving on to the state. In the United States, the overarching idea of citizenship is one based on inclusion by design, where the state uses its coercive powers to construct the citizens that it wants. Of course, this is not a static conception of citizenship, and the state is not an abstract entity that exists somewhere out there. Instead, citizenship responds to historical shifts in the state, and the state is discernible across a wide array of institutions, such as the planning of cities, infrastructural decisions, and the distribution of welfare, the military, and others that are organized both horizontally across geographical scales and vertically across nested hierarchies of government. The ways that sexuality, especially homosexuality, became a category that the state saw as in its best interest to police fits this narrative of citizenship formation and has a lot of affinities with how ethnicity, race, and gender are talked about with respect to political membership and rights claims. The history of the state's outright hostility toward homosexuality as threatening its legitimacy through the destabilization of familiar categories reveals the institutional logic with which it operates, not least through the intersection with these other categories of historically marginalized forms of citizenship. In her important study of the history of homosexuality, as it appears in discourses of US state policy on immigration, the military, and welfare during the first half of the 20th century, Margot Canaday, she's actually a professor at Stanford, traces the formation and evolution of the homosexual as a category to be regulated by the institutions responsible for defining the limits of citizenship. She argues that after the Second World War, an increasingly powerful state wrote new knowledge on homosexuality into federal policy, helping to produce the category of homosexuality through regulation. And further, the inscription of the homosexual-heterosexual binary in the three arenas she describes where the meaning of American citizenship was more sharply articulated over the course of the 20th century, reveals the emergence of that binary as one of the organizing categories of federal policy in the post-war United States. Canaday limits her study to issues around homosexuality pertaining to the state, albeit her treatment of the state is not limited to the practices of top-down decision-makers. She looks at evidence from the actions of bureaucrats at all levels in the geographically and hierarchically diffused places where the state is present, which offers her an opportunity to think about the state as not only intervening in, but as intervened by sexuality as well. In this way, the straight state is a necessarily hierarchical, regulatory domain where difference is to be avoided, if not altogether eradicated. I'm going to jump over to T.H. Marshall, who's very old, 1949. It's just sufficient to say that he had a formulation of citizenship that kind of organized citizenship rights in political, civil, and economic rights, which is very useful to kind of where my argument is going. But I'll continue with it. Certainly, as Canaday observes, some federal money went to single men and women, especially during the New Deal, in the form of emergency relief that sometimes flowed outside the channels of both marriage and reproduction to single men and a few unattached women, degraded for their dependence, judged for their solitude, and feared for their desperation. Perhaps this is the seed for the more radical elements of contemporary sexual citizenship in the form of demands for marginalized LGBTQ people's socioeconomic rights. Finally, I will shift my focus from the city and state for a brief outline of queer politics at the scale of the nation. It is at this scale that the more general and often too emphasized successful aspects of queer activism can be observed. In an influential 2002 essay on what she termed the new homonormativity, Lisa Dagen identifies an insidious narrative of selective gay and lesbian inclusion into mainstream third wave politics in the United States and Europe since the 1990s. As the politics associated with neoliberal economic policies and American economic and military supremacy expanded the rights associated with national citizenship to fully include and engage individuals with desirable economic potential, a close policing of what constitutes socially acceptable sexual attributes of this citizenship took place. LGBT people could make powerful rights claims primarily as long as they could present themselves as enthusiastic contributors to the free market economy. Dagen identifies in the discourses of selective gay and lesbian inclusion, the T and the Q of the LGBTQ is notably absent, a key manifestation of the contradictory sexual politics of neoliberalism. In her definition, new homonormativity is a politics that does not contest dominant heteronormative assumptions and institutions, but upholds and sustains them while promising the possibility of a demobilized gay constituency and a privileged, depoliticized gay culture anchored in domesticity and consumption. Two aspects of this definition are important in identifying the characteristics of national citizenship and the limits to broadening its scope. There is a promise for limiting political dissent, and it sets the basis for the production of the model of the private citizen. That is one who is not likely to form collectivities with socio-political demands for systemic change because she or he is content with their introspective domesticity. John D'Amelio, in his important essay, Capitalism and Gay Identity, published in 1993, asks, how is it that capitalism, whose structure made possible the emergence of gay identity and the creation of urban gay communities, appears unable to accept gay men and lesbians in its midst? He seeks the answer in capitalism's relationship to the nuclear family. The family, in the logic of capitalism that he describes, provides structure to society and organizes human relationships in terms of private ownership and personal responsibility for child rearing and augmenting one's property and resources. Even though in D'Amelio's analysis, capitalism is the problem, it is in its elevation of the nuclear family in ideological preeminence, that did not stop the transformation of the gay movement from its radical post-Stonewall roots to its socially conservative mainstreaming at the turn of this century. His plea that gays and lesbians must defend the social space they have created outside the boundaries of the heterosexual system, which has the potential to liberate sexual politics for all, has turned into a careful, precise, and limiting reading of sexual citizenship in successive court cases, the most recent one, the federal recognition of gay marriage last year, heralded as watershed moments in the history of gay activism. After the Pride festivities, 2 Junes ago, that coincided with the Supreme Court's decision about gay marriage and were aptly celebrated by most major US corporations in ads and notes of solidarity, many LGBTQ activists seem to suggest it is time to go home and close the door. To answer D'Amelio's question then about why capitalism was unable to accept gays and lesbians, even though it purportedly created them, the answer might be, it actually did, but only those that fit its mold. That does not include, for example, an important gay club in San Francisco, the Stat, which is going, there's actually development since I wrote this, which is going to offer its city grounds for capital maximization. It sounds that the Stat might actually remain there, but I think that what interests me so much about this particular case study, and I'm going off script because I'm going to end here with this example, is that I think that in my research, it might become a very central location, a locus, where to see all of those kinds of different understandings of sexual citizenship being spatialized, and kind of the diverse rights claims that are associated with being in that place and wanting it to exist. In fact, my hunch is that once you create it into an institution, you fix its identity. And queer identity is not necessarily about fixing a space into a particular institution. So I'm not sure where my argument is going to go, because my work on this is just starting, but I think that it might be interesting to see where are people socializing, where are the people who used to socialize around the Stad now. Perhaps that might take me to Auckland, I think. But and also I should say I'm using a fantastic film for if you get a chance to see it. It's Filthy Gorgeous, the Tranny Sachs story by Sam Mullins, which is the copyright issue. So if you get a chance to see an event, that's a fantastic film that tells the story of the Stad very, very well. So just to conclude, I am interested in developing this idea or kind of themes of queer urban studies that just in line with the first example that seems to be completely unrelated now after you've heard the kind of formulation of citizenship. The way I kind of want to bring it all together in particular spaces in the cities that I'm looking at is through these kind of minor gestures. So I'm really interested in looking at the bold, radical, city-leading proposals that are manifest in minor architectural gestures and the citizenship formulations that are built